Hi guys, this is Hudson here with my presentation for sacred geometry. So just to start off, my presentation is on tessellation origami. So tessellations, as you probably recall, are a type of pattern that are oftentimes inherently fractal in nature, and they basically use the repeating placement of geometry with symmetry operations that involve translation, repetition, dilation, and they form very intricate patterns like this one here. This is from a book called The Mosque, edited by Martin Fishman and Hassan Uddin Khan. So it's basically goes into details a lot of architecture in mosques around the world. And so I've chosen a few pictures from it that kind of illustrate some different tessellations that have been found in mosques around the world. Because tessellations and tiles actually is the root of paper folding, which not a lot of people know. But paper folding didn't begin in Japan. It sort of spread east and was imported from China, but paper was predominantly a luxury because of the inherent expense in producing it. So people weren't folding frogs all the time or whatever. But with the increase in ability to produce paper with the Industrial Revolution, it became a lot more prevalent in Japanese culture, and they sort of took it to the level that we know it of now with all the different shapes, and that's why they're sort of credited worldwide with, origami. It's not called something in Spanish from where the Moors were, where that temple was from. That should be a picture of. So origami actually had its root in paper folding based off tessellations. So, however, it wasn't until probably the 1970s, fractal math coming on the scene with computer models being able to really assist the visualization of a lot of this more complex semi-imaginary math, that fractal tessellations were able to be put back into origami in a way that was complex enough that it wasn't some basic things. So some of the basic things that would have existed for a while in tessellations would have been folds like this. This is a basket weave fold. This is the type of weave that humankind has been doing for a really long time to produce baskets and pottery and all kinds of stuff like that. And you can see it's pretty simple set of folds in general. Not a lot of steps and then this is just repeated to make like the basket pattern. So if you look closely though, you'll see that there are triangles here and not squares. This is because this is an isometric grid as opposed to a quadratic grid. Quadratic uses 4 points to make a square, and those squares are repeated. But it's a less efficient storage of points because the distance between this point and that point is much farther than this point and this point. If you rotate it, that's going to be like this little leftover right here, which is why diagonal is quicker than here to here, but it's obviously longer to go diagonally from A to D than it is from A to B. So, however, an isometric grid, as you can tell, A, B, and C is the same distance as D, E, and F. It's all the same distance. So it allows some interesting things that you can do with the geometry. So a more complex fold is this here. This is a hexagon twist. This involves 120-degree pleats, like this here. 120 degrees because it's 3 pleats folded at 120 degrees away from each other, times 6. So you can see it kind of locks in the back like this, and it's a very stable set of folds, and it's a little bit of effort to kind of pull it apart. Because of that, here you see what looks like unfolded, but with just the right sort of finesse, maybe even a bit of luck, there we go. So utilizing this, before beginning the class, the most complex figure that I made was this. This is called should have this ready, I'm sorry, spread hexagon, or hexagon spread, one or the other, spread hexagons. So basically it involves making the hexagon and spreading it all the way out. The camera light, come on you, there we go. So there is actually 100 and 35 individual 120 degree pleats on this sort of flower of life Mobius egg shape. And if I turn on the back, you can see it's a bunch of, man, the lighting is terrible. You can see that, come on, man, give me a break here. You can see that it's a bunch of hexagons. But that, like, my skill in lining up the geometry in the original grid was such that, you know, I got into a little bit of trouble here and here. But you can't really see it as much on the front, which is nice. So, I don't want you guys to think that I just, like, skipped out and used something that I'd done on an earlier project before and, you know, slid it in for this because I was already knowledgeable. So I really wanted to push myself. So what I did this time, what is this one called? Yeah, I should have probably had this ready. This is called Star Puff. And basically involved me folding the same grid that I did originally on the smaller egg that I just showed you, then taking it to another level where I popped each of the grids. As you can see, this hexagon here at the top, this is an example of what one of those hexagon shapes would have looked like in that hexagon egg. So then by taking it, twisting, performing the operation that's known as a triangle twist in origami, and squishing down each of these angles, I'm able to turn it into a flattened triangle twist. So then briefly, I'll sit here and I'll flatten each one of these into the triangle twist, which goes a lot quicker now because I already did it a few times. And you can see now that it looks like the rest of this triangle grid or a basic isometric grid that emerged from the back. So one of the last steps then is opening up the hexagon grid the hexagon then that is inside, as you can see now. And I give it a little push from behind. Hence the puff, because you're literally puffing out these stars. And I'm left with my final product of the puff stars. I'll turn this from a few angles so you guys can see it real well. And flipping over, you can see the hexagons on the back too. And you can tell that my geometry, while not perfect, was a lot better than last time. So one thing that made that a little bit easier too, I wanted this to be very visible, so I made the grid a lot bigger. I used a much larger sheet of paper. For the other piece that I showed you a second ago, the size of the paper that I was using, it's this big. So it was one of these size papers that turned into that. Paper that I used for this sheet, again, that big. So it helped. I hope everyone had fun learning about sacred geometry, and I hope that you enjoyed my brief presentation on tessellation origami, that maybe you were inspired to check out a little origami for yourself or learn a little bit more about tessellations. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please be ready to present them to me on Saturday. Look forward to seeing you guys then.